Hi everyone, Stepan here. It's Monday, so we are going to continue the saga on Garry Kasparov. We are going to look at an absolutely astounding game he played when he was 10 years old. So we are still at the age of 10, and this was the under-18 USSR Championship played in Baku in 1973, so he was 10. And I managed to find the information, excuse me, on how he did in the tournament. So he scored 7 wins, 2 draws and 0 losses, and he shared 3rd and 4th place with over 30 people playing. So again, this is an under-18 championship and Garry Kasparov is 10 years old. So in chess, that's a huge thing. He was much better than his peers, obviously, and he was much better than than much older players. I couldn't find how old Shohrat Muratkuliev was, excuse me for my pronunciation, but there's a big chance that he was older. I expect most players were much older than Kasparov at the tournament. Okay, so, and we have a very interesting variation. E4, E5, knight f3, knight c6. We have the Ruy Lopez with bishop b5, a6, bishop a4, knight f6. And now, of course, castles and bishop e7 and rook e1 and b5 and bishop b3 and d6 and c3 castles and h3 would lead to the main lines of the closed Ruy Lopez, where black plays knight a5, knight b8, rook e8, bishop b7. Instead of all of that, Kasparov plays a gambit line, the Mackenzie variation, which is very interesting and gives black a ton of problems to solve very early on. Okay, so he plays d4, and of course black should take it. If black doesn't take it, then he is in trouble. So this is very similar to the Scotch gambit and to the Deutsch gambit in the Italian. So of course e takes d4, and now the main move is castles, simply leaving this pawn unpre, and of course black shouldn't take it. Black continues with bishop e7, now rook e1, b5, bishop e3, d6 preventing e5, but bishop d5 is the point, and now you basically have to take, so takes, and knight e5, and white doesn't take on e5, he takes on d4. If he takes on e5, then d5 is a problem. Instead of that, Kasparov plays in a more aggressive way. He plays e5, which is a very natural move. And I think it's trickier for black to face this move than castles. Therefore, I think in practical play, especially when kids are playing, okay, his opponent may have been an adolescent already, I don't know, it's harder to meet. So in this position, black has to move the knight. Again, very similar to the Deutsch gambit and the Scotch gambit, so knight e4. And in this position, Kasparov simply castles. And now black has to develop. Black doesn't really have too much choice. He plays bishop e7 for castling. And in this position, there are 2 moves. You can either liquidate and trade off some pieces with knight takes d4, which Kasparov didn't play. After knight takes d4, black could castle or play knight takes d4. If he castles, then it's very hard to defend after knight f5. And you can see that there's queen g4, queen h5. Queen g4 would already be simply crushing because you have to play knight f6. So for example, if black makes a mistake with b5, then queen g4, and now you have to play knight f6. I take it. You cannot take my bishop, excuse me, because I'm threatening mate. And once you recapture here, I can simply retreat my bishop, and I'm much better. Also, after knight takes d4, black could play knight takes d4, which is easier to play, and after queen takes, you play knight c5. And in this position, trades happen. So castles and knight d5, and d6, knight e7, queen e7, etc. Instead of that, though, probably trying to avoid liquidation, Kasparov plays rook e1, simply attacking the knight. Now, again, you don't have much choice. You play knight c5, attacking my bishop and saving your knight. And now bishop takes c6, d takes c6, and knight takes d4. And now we look at the material. It's 7 pawns each, so the material is even. If we compare the development, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 against 1, 2, 3, 4, excuse me. So white has a lead in development, white has a safer king, white also has a better pawn structure because black has this Berlin/exchange Ruy Lopez pawn structure with doubled c-pawns. So white actually has a pawn majority on the king side, which he could utilize, and black doesn't. These pawns are pretty immobile. Finally, black castles, knight c3. And again, Kasparov was 10 years old during this game. I'm going to do an engine analysis at the end of the video, as always. However, there aren't too many things to analyze, I believe. I tried getting into deviations and getting into sidelines, but it seems that his play was almost perfect. So I'm going to change my mind about the best child prodigy world champion. I don't think it was Kramnik anymore. I think Kasparov was better at the age of 10. Okay, knight e6 played, which attempts to trade pieces, but allows knight f5. And when you get a knight on f5, if you're Garry Kasparov, you like it. That's his favorite placement for the knight. I've seen so many Kasparov games won because of knight f5. Now, black should be wise and exchange queens, because white is already attacking. However, if you go into an endgame, then your position is simply worse because of the pawn structure and your lagging development. So bishop g5 played. And now I just couldn't find a better move than what Kasparov played. He played queen g4, firstly declining a queen trade. Secondly, if black wishes to take on c1, that's great. Then you use two moves to develop your bishop and to trade off my undeveloped bishop, and you connect my rooks. So black isn't really going to take. And I'm very close to playing knight e4 and putting a ton of pressure on your position with either knight f6 check or knight takes bishop. So already this is looking very, very deadly. Black plays a tricky move himself, but unfortunately it doesn't work. He plays knight e4, attacking c2, double attacking the knight, leaving the bishop unpre. So white shouldn't take the knight because he loses his queen. Knight h6 doesn't work. So white doesn't really have much choice. He has to take on g5. And now, of course, black's queen is attacked, so he doesn't have time to take on c2. He also doesn't have time to capture on f5 with his knight. What he can do is either move the queen, which would be bad, or take on f5 with the bishop. So this is the only move. And this is the only point at which I think Kasparov made a mistake. So obviously your queen is attacked, your c2 pawn is attacked, black's queen is attacked. So if you move your queen, you gain a tempo. If you move your queen away, then black has to move his queen away. Now Kasparov played queen g3, which I don't like for two reasons. Firstly, it doesn't put enough pressure on black's king and on the f6 square, which is crucial here. Secondly, it may run into knight e2 check. It's highly unlikely, but these patterns are well known, and your queen on g3, king on g1, with a knight on d4 or f4 can often end up badly. What he should have played instead of queen g3, I think, and we're going to check that, is queen h4. And I just couldn't find a defense to this. I don't know what black does. So what I'm threatening is I'm going to force your queen to move. So for example, you play queen to d7, which is the only sensible square, and I play rook a to d1, pinning your knight, so you don't have the option to take on c2. So you play c5, which seems sensible. Your knight was double attacked, and now I simply continue with knight e4. Now if you take my knight, then my rook is coming to the g file, and that's absolutely deadly. If you don't take my knight, for example, you play queen c6, double attacking my knight, making your knight mobile and stopping c3, which knight e4 also prepares. So in this position after knight e4, if you don't do anything, I'll just play c3 and win your knight. So queen c6 makes sense. And now after knight f6 check, I believe that's game over. I just don't see a defense. Because if you don't do anything, then I will play g4 and mate you on h7, or win your bishop, most likely mate you on h7 with f4 and f5. And if you take my knight, then I take with the bishop, and fine, you have knight e6 defending, but I play queen g3, you save yourself, and then I play f4. And whether you can save your piece or not, I don't know. I'm going to check it with an engine, but I believe that you can't. So your king doesn't have h8, your bishop has no retreat squares and it's unable to move. If your knight moves, I play f5 anyway. You don't have any checks, you cannot challenge me on the d file, so I believe this is just winning. Maybe I'm missing something, but we will see. And the other option after queen h4 would be f6, which is absolutely suicidal. I mean, that's the only other way to defend your queen. So we f6, and now if you take with the g-pawn, then I just play bishop h6, and after rook f7 I play rook d1, and again, you're in trouble. And if you play rook takes f6, then I just take your rook. Or even better, I could continue with something like rook e5 or rook d1, increasing the pressure because this rook isn't going anywhere. The rook is pinned to the queen. Instead of that though, Kasparov played queen g3, which puts less pressure on the f6 square, and I think it's not as good. But it serves the same purpose, the tempo on the queen. Queen c8 played, which makes probably more sense than queen d7, but it restricts your a8 rook from moving. Rook a to d1, normal, saving himself from knight c2 winning an exchange. Knight c2 anyway. I don't like the move knight c2. I think black should have tried to develop or save his king somehow, improve his king safety. Rook e2 attacking the knight. For the moment it's defended by the bishop. Queen e6, connecting his rooks, and now bishop f6, absolutely crushing. I mean, there's no better move than this. If you play g6, then I win easily. So if g6, then queen h4, and you're not in time. So let's say rook d8, giving up an exchange, that wouldn't work. I mean, I just take it. It's a whole rook, and you also don't have time for queen e8, queen f8. So if you play g6, you just lose in 3 moves. It's mate in 3. So he played bishop g6. Also, if after bishop f6 you want to take my bishop, you can't because your pawn is pinned. So bishop g6, and now a great tactical move. Okay, pause your video, find a way to win a pawn. I think this was very interesting as a pattern. I didn't see it before. Okay, so he played bishop takes g7. Now, of course, if you take it, then I take your knight for free because your bishop is pinned. Black did play that, so rook takes c2. Now rook a d8, and Kasparov, of course, defends with rook c to d2. Queen e7, which I'm not sure I understand. I don't really know what queen e7 was about, to be honest. Probably after f4 he has a check. Other than that, he is defending his rook, but I believe it would have been better to just trade off a pair of rooks and play rook e8 and put pressure on e5. So for example, so takes, rook e8, and now if white wishes to play f4, I think that's kind of risky. You can play king h8, and if f5 you take it, if knight e4 you take it. So I think this would have been a more solid defense. Instead, queen e7 defending, and now you could play f4, which is riskier. You could play h4, you could play knight e4. Knight e4 seems best, but h4 seems more forcing. He played that in the game. King h8 saving the bishop. And now we reach what I think is the most instructive point in the game. When you have a knight versus bishop endgame, and there are pawns on 2 sides of the board, usually it's considered that the bishop is better. However, in this position, white's pawn structure is so dominating, black's king is so restricted, and white has a 4-2 pawn majority on the king side, that liquidating into a knight versus bishop endgame would have been simply crushing. Kasparov didn't play that, but this is my analysis. So you just exchange everything, and then you play queen g5. Now, if black doesn't take, what does he do? I mean, you don't have a check, you don't have anything. So if you move your queen away somewhere, then I check you and start to slowly bringing my knight up the board, and it seems very lost for black if the queen is left in the middle of his position and his king cut off. So after queen g5, I was analyzing queen takes g5, pawn takes g5, and the knight is just much better in this endgame. More importantly, I'm going to play g4, f4, f5, and just create passed pawns. So let's say king g7, which seems most normal. g4, let's say c5, black tries to go for b5, b4, c4, but now f4, and you already have to watch out, you lose your bishop. So let's say bishop c2, and now just king f2, and I'm stopping your pawn majority. You're never reaching my pawn majority, and my knight is able to enter the game via some beautiful squares, not to mention knight e2, knight g3, knight f5, and you can basically resign. So in this position, exchanging everything off, I think, was absolutely crushing. Instead, he played queen g5, which has the same idea, but you leave a pair of rooks on the board. And actually, a rook and bishop in this position, I think, are more powerful than rook and knight, depending on how the play goes. Black exchanges the queens, exchanges a pair of rooks, and plays bishop f5. Probably to stop g4, probably to get his bishop to e6. I believe that's the case. f4 played, king g7, king f2, h5, trades off some pawns, but still leaves white with a 3-1, king f3, rook g8, and now knight e4. If you trade, you lose, because I have a 3-1 pawn majority, and your pawns are very slow. Bishop g4 played, okay, it's a check, so king e3. And in this position, black blundered away the game. He played king g6, just losing a piece to knight f6, and then he resigned. If he doesn't play king h6, king g6, then what does he do? If he plays rook e8, I win the rook. He could probably move the rook somewhere else or start pushing his pawns, but it's not easy to push your pawns because my knight is controlling c5. So I don't know, let's say rook h8 and knight f6 and bishop e6, for example, and I just push. So I just play g4. And this is completely lost for black anyway. Okay, so let's, excuse me, sorry. Let's do an engine analysis from here. Everything up to this point was, I think, very good. Here he played queen g3, I think he should have played queen h4. Yeah, okay. Wait, queen takes bishop? I didn't think that was good. Okay, let's check queen takes bishop. Queen h4 is the best move, but takes. Why would I get his rooks to the center of the board? No, I think this is equal. Now it says it's equal. I have a slightly better pawn structure, but I don't think it's enough to win. But after queen h4, okay, the engine doesn't play f6, which I agree with. It plays queen d7. And now it plays rook e to d1. I don't understand that. I would never leave my rook on a1. Now it does play c5, saving the knight. And now it doesn't play knight e4, which I thought was best. It plays bishop e7. Okay, and bishop c2. Aha, because of bishop c5. Okay, and then if you take on d1, I take on f8. Okay, but knight e4 has to be okay. Queen c6, okay, and now c3 first seems to be plus 1.1, and the knight, I guess, goes to e6. Ah, and now not knight f6, but knight g3. Okay, and let's look at knight f6 check, and then you take it, and then I take it to the bishop, and you do play knight e6, and I play queen g3 check, and bishop g6, and I do play f4. So what's the defense? Knight g7. Okay, knight g7 stops f5. I didn't see that. Okay, but he played queen g3, and this seems very equal. Queen c8, rook a1 is correct. Knight takes c2 is surprisingly correct. Rook e2, queen e6, bishop f6. I mean, you can see how precisely Kasparov played. Bishop f6 is the best engine move. Okay, bishop g6 only defense, and now this trick, bishop takes g7 is correct. And rook c2, and this was correct. Okay, yeah, okay, exchanging was correct for black, but queen e7 is okay. And now h4, best move. Okay, again, he played the best move. King h8. Okay, queen g5 second best, but this idea of trading seems winning. Let's check my analysis. And queen g5, can black decline the trade? It says if he plays queen f8 or queen g8, it's plus 4. So queen g5, hg5, bishop f5 was the best move. He played that in the game, but not in this variation. Now g4. Okay, c5 is okay, and f4. And yeah, this seems just completely crushing, plus 2. He played queen g5, and queen takes g5, and h takes g5, and rook d2, and rook d2, and bishop f5 is the best move, and f4. Yeah, his play seems perfect. His play just seems perfect, and also his opponent played really well. These are all best engine moves. Bishop g4 is not, but yeah, now king g6. So rook h8 or moving the bishop away. So I played rook h8, and after knight f6, bishop e6, and yeah, just g4. This seems to be over. So Kasparov's play was near perfect, and also there were no issues in the analysis. It was really easy to analyze this game. which I think is a trait of very strong players, that they play games which seem easy after you see them. It seems like he just played normal moves and won, and it seems that there were no alternatives to his perfect moves, and that's what you see in Bobby Fischer games, Karpov games, Kasparov games. So this is astounding. He was 10 years old. Let me know what you think about the game, and thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.